The moment the people in this country cease to be dangerous men is going to be the day we cease to have a country.
All matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration.
The only truth you know is what you get over this tube.
We are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively.
An entire generation that never knew anything that didn't come out of this tube. This tube is the gospel, the ultimate revelation.
Their whole purpose throughout history has been to teach a small number of people how to become adept at controlling everyone else.
There's no such thing as death. Life is only a dream, and we're the imagination of ourselves.
The table is tilted, folks. The game is rigged. And nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to care.
All the world is a stage, and everything that occurs on it is planned to happen that way. A totalitarian new world order is being constructed, but they will only succeed if the people let them. And all that is needed to prevent it is for people to understand its dangers and how it works, and to just look and see how orchestrated world events really are. Has anyone noticed that many of the world's most brutal and dictatorial regimes, such as North Korea, were supplied with weapons by the West to begin with? And these regimes are allowed to stay in power. So what is all this talk of freeing people? We are told we went into Iraq to free the people, yet look at what's happening in Burma. If we are so much about freeing people, well, the conflict and humanitarian violations that have been occurring in Burma have been allowed to continue for over 60 years. So why have we not gone and freed the Burmese? The fact is that there are many brutal regimes that have all been allowed to retain power, and going into Iraq was never about freeing anyone. It was about securing resources. Many brutal regimes have now become our allies, and yet the brutality in these countries continues unabated. It is allowed to continue because the banksters don't mind the brutality. The fact is that it's about the money, and if brutality is what it takes to keep the people in line, then they are all for it. And this is exactly the same type of brutality that will soon be introduced throughout the entire world. Almost all the cards have been played. Whether you choose to believe it or not, Australia is set to become the headquarters for the new global government. That is why the new Australian Parliament House is 4 times bigger than what is needed for the Australian people. It is also why its construction was overseen by Henry Kissinger. The Australian people have been completely disarmed and are soon to lose their internet freedom. England is a surveillance nightmare. The last cards to be played is to crash the US economy completely and introduce one currency for the whole of North and South America, which will be called the Amero. Then all borders between the US, Canada and Mexico will be dissolved, thus merging the whole continent into the North American Union. And the final card to be played is to disarm the American people. To do that, the government will most likely create an enormous and widely perceived surge in domestic crime, school massacres and gun crime in general. If they create enough carnage at home, people will simply ask to be disarmed. Once the American people are disarmed, there will be no stopping them. Codex Alimentarius will be introduced globally, and when the people of the world start dying from toxic and nutrient-devoid food and beg for their governments to save them, an Asian Union will be formed. And the Asian Union, the African Union, the European Union and the American Union will be merged into one world government. So, what do we do? What can you or I, as little people, do about this situation? Write to your local member? Start a new political party? Run for office? Approach the media? Well, I've tried and they're just not interested. All of these things may seem like good ideas, but the reality is they are all simply distractions. Truly, the best thing any of us can do is to deal with the situation at a grassroots level, because at the end of the day, the best weapon we have to protect and preserve our freedoms is to wake people up. Talk to your neighbours, talk to people on the street, hand out flyers, anything. Just wake people up to the reality that we are now facing. The people of Germany in 1938 were in denial too, and Nazi Germany was but a prelude of what is to come. The blinders simply have to come off. This is a daunting task, but it is one that simply has to be done, because when enough people wake up, we will be able to effect change through sheer weight in numbers. Our only real hope lies in the awakening of the people. The reality is that nothing else will suffice. People seem to think that the New World Order will emerge as one group of people sitting around a table in Geneva, but it's far more sinister than that. The New World Order will be the quiet and unnoticed introduction of a global plutocracy. It will not be one governing body sitting in a room. It will be a quiet merging of all governments and all police forces across the world. The aim is a global two-class society consisting of the elite and the workers, with all dissent squashed and all rights removed. And the enemy is you. Imagine life in a totally controlled and totalitarian society, where every move you make is monitored, where all money is in digital credits attached to a microchip in your arm, where every person must work very hard simply to keep their head above an insurmountable pool of self-generating debt created wholly by design, and where all debts are automatically removed from your account when they are due. A society where rules and labour camps are controlled by a global Gestapo, and where if you make one move out of line or raise one word of complaint, all that is needed to control you is to turn off your microchip. For without the chip, you have no access to funds. You cannot eat or pay rent or do anything at all. With no chip, you cease to exist, except as a dissenter, a terrorist, which means you can be arrested, held without charge, and legally tortured indefinitely. This is the reality that is being created for the people of the world, if the people would just open their eyes to see it. My brothers and my sisters from all across the world, take the blinders off. It's important that you do, because they will only succeed in the creation of such a world if the people allow it to happen. This reality is truly what we make it. We quite literally choose the reality we live in ourselves. Once you fully understand that, the power to change it is simple. Take the blinders off. Wake up, because time is running out. Please, just wake up.
Things that we're talking about now, the kinds of things that suggest that our inner world and our inner thoughts, feelings, emotions, beliefs in any way affect the world around us. And it was through direct experience. What I began to understand was that this is the great secret that everyone knows except us in the West. Almost any other culture that we go to, from the monasteries in Egypt and Tibet and India into Bolivia and Peru, the indigenous traditions, little villages in the Andes Mountains, they all know that there is this experience that we can have inside of our bodies that affects our world in some way, and our science simply has not allowed for that historically. But I was trained as a scientist, and I was trained to look in the world around me for my answers, so I began to go to these places. I began to go into the monasteries, all the places that I mentioned. And it was through the direct experience of sitting in the presence of people who have lived and practiced the kinds of traditions that they teach about. And what we begin to understand is that this is the place where science got it wrong. The space that we believe is empty is not really so empty. It's full of a living essence, of a living material that we're only beginning to understand. We may have experiences inside of our bodies that influence the world beyond our bodies through the conduit of what's in this space.